So,
Trying to hit that master switch.
you want to go ahead and start?
Let's go through them. I'd go ahead and go through the ceremonial parts. Hopefully, turn back on or something.
Okay, hopefully Dave can call back in and we'll get back on. Can everybody hear me okay? Barely?
Hello, can you hear me?
What about now? Any better? Hello?
Hello, can you hear me?
No, you need to turn the volume up on these a little bit. Yeah, that's low. That's very low.
Why don't you go ahead and do the pledge of allegiance? Call to order first. Then we can do.
Okay, let's call the Board of Aldermen work session meeting to order April 3rd, 2024 at 6:16 PM. First order of business is the Pledge of Allegiance.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay. Better, I think.
It seems.
Is he on or not? No?
He's not on yet. I don't
Okay.
send him a message.
Okay, the first item for discussion and consideration is limiting political activity of employees, city employees. Think, you want to go ahead and take it, James? Go ahead.
All right, well, thank you, Mr. Mayor and Board. So since the last several weeks, some of the conversations that have both heard here at the Board of Aldermen meeting and online, some of the conversations we've seen, it called into question whether or not there were individuals employed by the city. I think it was- Just trying to call.
He was
That was-
trying to,
that was-
he was trying to call the boardroom directly instead of joining me.
So, you might recall that, after some, investigation by myself, having conversations with some of our staff, there had been no indication that any staff members had been involved in either taking down signs or involved in any, politically oriented activities. However, I did notice, and I had a conversation with our city attorney, that our ordinance nor our city policy currently forbids it, which is odd because there are many other places I've been or been involved with that is usually explicitly stated what the bounds of political activity that any member of a city staff could be involved in. So I talked to our city attorney about it. We did some digging. He prepared this RBA for us just to have a conversation as to how we could, if it is the will of the board, structure some guidelines for staff to prohibit or curtail political activities in the future. Again, like I said, this isn't because we have covered any political activities or ongoings in the city, but we do want to make sure that it's explicitly forbidden and prohibited, and that our staff are well aware both that this is the policy of the city and that there may be consequences if that was something that was engaged in the future. So with that, I'll update. Thank you. I'll let
Keep to the
the
rest.
board give me some thoughts or opinions on what your feelings are on any policy going forward.
I have some questions. Item number 1, use of official authority or influence for the purpose of interfering with the results of an election. What exactly are you talking about? Are you talking about canvassing neighborhoods? Are you talking about messing with somehow the election results, which I don't know how you could do that, but I just like some sort of,
I mean, I think it's broadly written. I could let John talk about it, but I mean, obviously, there's authority of the city, whether it's location and placement of signs or just anything regulated by the city, using our power to regulate anything in the community or anything in the city for the purposes to directly and influence the outcome of an election and so somebody wanted to put up banners, came to get a permit, we said no, because we don't like your candidate or something like that. Obviously, that's completely, would be completely forbidden because that would be trying to influence or interfere with the election. We don't count votes here. We don't run campaign, or rather, we don't run polling places here at the city level. So, but any official capacity of the city, I mean, the city clerk, obviously takes a lot of the takes the nominations for the offices of the city clerk or any other officer somehow use their position to interfere with that process, that would be banned. So that's just a broadly worded way of saying we certainly couldn't use our positions in any way. However, that could be construed to influence the outcome of an election.
I will note that this is language that is modeled precisely after the federal Hatch Act and also the local Hatch Act, which the mini Hatch Act, or little Hatch Act, which is what the state's version of it is. And some cities adopt similar provisions. And in addition to what James stated, it's not about individual activities, it's about official activities in the official capacity. So for example, an employee cannot support a candidate using their title. There's a prohibition under such regulation. So someone can't say, I support this candidate as the city administrator of the city of Edmonton. They can't campaign, displaying city uniforms. But there is a large body of police law at the state and federal level that defines what that is. But it's fact specific.
okay, so location and placement of signs, what would that be about? I mean, I'm trying to understand, like I'm an alderman, so I can't put a sign
It
in.
has nothing to do with you.
Okay,
It's only employees, not elected.
not elected. Okay, so even though we receive a W-2, we're not considered
Correct.
employees? Okay.
For the purpose of this regulation. Or could you?
So do none of these 5 things apply to us because
Correct.
we're elected officials? They're
Correct.
only for city employees?
Correct. It's good. When I first saw this, admittedly, I was actually surprised we didn't have something already, because I think I've seen it in every other city that, I've looked at their code, either this or a policy, and it's extremely common for that reason. I know, for instance, actually had a friend when I was younger that ran for city council over in Chesterfield and was a police officer at the same time. Had to not being a police officer, another two. It's worth noting too, that the language specifically section 1 has been upheld by the United States Supreme Court in 2 instances. It's been longstanding law approximately 80 years. And the purpose behind it, which is admittedly a restriction of free speech, it is. Or it has acknowledged that it is permissible restriction. And the purpose behind it being the protection of employees from being forced into political.
Question along the veins of what you just mentioned about that anecdote. Does this mean that if a city employee were to want to run for an office, that just the act of becoming a candidate would make them ineligible for employment with the city?
Correct. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. Federal as well.
Hey, Jeff, let's leave it to John. Okay, thank you.
Conversely, one other thing that was not necessarily considered in this, but along those same lines, oftentimes cities are also prohibited from hiring without a cooling off period elected officials within. So if somebody is an alderman or a mayor and steps down and then wants to be a road official or city clerk or something like that, oftentimes there's like a 1-year moratorium on that, or sometimes an outright prohibition. I've seen more of a 1-year moratorium.
Does this cover that?
This one doesn't.
Right.
This was originally related specifically to just the engagement of political activities by.
I'm trying to kill off my shine, can
Do we have a cooling off period within our own city?
We don't have, yeah, we don't really have anything that talks about either issue.
We don't have one, but there is a statutory one. Now, it is not as broad as what the administrator was stating, but there is one that if they cannot be in a position where they, for compensation, would be attempting to influence Board of Aldermen. And there are certain positions who have been interpreted to be included within that regulation.
I don't think including just to say, I think including the moratorium probably be a good idea if you're gonna do it. If you're gonna do the other things, you might as well just.
I think it's-
strictly so.
I think it's clean that way. I mean, I think it holds everybody accountable across the board and it's one thing I will tell you, just whichever route the board decides to go with this. John and I have talked about the merits of the city attorney rather than whether or not we want this to be a policy of the city or an ordinance. Obviously, if this is there's different implications to doing either, but depending on if you're going to ban, rather make a cooling off period or like hiring former elected officials into city government, that probably would be better to be an ordinance than just a policy. If you're already an employee of the city and governed by our policies, obviously I can take, the mayor can take disciplinary action against anybody that breaks policies. I don't have a problem with it being either. In fact, I originally thought it would probably be best to be an ordinance, but a lot of communities, especially communities that are charter cities, you'll see it in their charter.
I would lean toward this being ordinance personally. Is there a reason that it should not be?
I have no reason to.
And I think ordinances are good also because again, it's something that's more publicly available and readily seen by the citizens. So when people are looking, they oftentimes don't go through our city policy employee manual.
Yeah.
Yep.
But for purposes
There's
of,
a little bit, if somebody decides they want to change it, a little bit, not more, but a little bit more visibility. The
absolutely,
changing of it because it's an ordinance change versus just adopting a policy.
certainly, yeah.
And there's the rules, but what is the proposed penalty? And is the proposed penalty to this termination of employment or maybe proposing tiered?
I mean, I would suggest, I mean, I would hate for somebody who, especially unknowingly, or I guess you'd have to put in knowingly, but certainly when you start getting into ordinances, law, you're talking about somebody's MO on something, whether it's knowingly or purposefully. I would hate for someone, Public Works Department, to go clean up a bunch of signs that were left even today, like after the election, and then somebody throw a fit about it and say, this person needs to be fired. It's like, look, man, I'm just cleaning up stuff off the street. So, or somebody who didn't realize we have a policy, which we do. We tend to remove commercial signs out of the right of ways. We don't remove political signs. To get a new person or any person that comes in and thinks it's the right thing, I'd hate for them to be hired just for that, so. A lot of that, I think, intent is a main, big part of it, and I think that's an administrative task to try to get to the bottom of what was done and why, and what the intent was, what the proper form of discipline.
I think
Any of that.
for me, I like this, in spirit. I think for me, that is a big question because, you know, for example, somebody goes out and they go to a political rally and then they get cold and they go back to their truck and they've got a dark and berry jacket. They just throw that on and they get into the crowd and snaps a picture or something like that. I want to make sure that people are protected and are actually hitting the mark we want to. So
Well, and as the city attorney also said, this actually talks about people's official capacity. There are communities, my former community, where it doesn't matter what capacity, you cannot be involved at all. Can't put a yard sign in your yard, can't donate, contribute personally to anybody's in your own, in that city.
Mm.
And so oftentimes that usually affects residents of the city, it mostly affects residents of the city, which they work. You don't live there, you know, put a yard sign at my house, nobody's ever gonna know. But, yeah, it's mostly for residents in the city, but also, you know, keep in mind, to the city attorney's point, part of this is about, fairness and the city showing, you know, equal application of the law and nonpartisan activities. The other part of this is defending, or not defending, but protecting our employees from the feeling the pressure of needing to feel like they have to choose a side anyway, you know, at any point. And so, you know, you would hate for someone to say like, okay, maybe not in your official capacity, but I could still use your help, wage, or whatever that would be. So it's been written this way, but I would have no problem with a much more strict interpretation, because I think it does protect the integrity of city staff and city hall. Up to the board.
We want to move forward with, ordinance.
it's a good discussion. Personal spirit. I'm in favor.
Would, I guess, I mean, the city attorney and I could go over some, specific wording and put this in ordinance form. Would it be the board's direction to maybe include, non-official activities as well?
I would advise against it. I
Yeah.
think that runs very close to the First Amendment.
I personally think that if we sort of mirrored what the Hatch Act legally says and how they have that stated, that it seems sufficient to me.
And of course, timing on this, given the election, everything, I hope that we put this on the agenda after the new board members are sat and all that kind of stuff, not.
The other question I would have around this is if someone was in violation of this, what would the penalties be and how would that be assessed?
I think it's a great question.
You missed it, Mike was. While you were trying to say your name.
Did you already answer?
I did, and,
Sorry.
No,
you
came up with this all on your own, man. It's all good.
Sorry, I was a little distracted with teams over there.
We're just in awe of the end of the
Yeah.
question. No, so we were talking about it more likely being an administrative activity based on, the intent, you know, the severity of what was done, the intent. If there was a, purposeful intent or knowing intent, you know, to violate the,
Well, that's
Policy.
put the jacket on all of them.
yeah, and so, or public works people, you know, moving a sign or moving something, even if it was in the, you know, even if it was in the right of way and you were doing work, you know, you're doing road work, and you're like, sorry, you gotta move the sign, somebody gets upset, so, well, we moved everything. You're gonna get tore up. We just want to make sure that there is enough room to understand that not every activity, you know, that there is an intent to the activity that should weigh in on it. So,
Do we have any annual training associated with, certain statutory requirements, associated with being, a employee of a city, and things like that? Could we incorporate just sort of the general, kind of help the understanding of the folks within there, that if we did do this, kind of have an annual training piece? I know for federal employees have that, and I think most state employees do as well.
Well, we'll certainly include this in our policy manual as well, just so people know what they can get back to. Our staff doesn't typically just look at the ordinance.
Sure,
um,
exactly. Yeah.
Unless they're doing a review of the ordinance for some reason, but
Sometimes it may not be very
yeah. And
crystal clear on the way things are worded.
And most certainly, I think it would be my intent to do this at our staff meetings, re-election season. So when it starts to get to campaign filing time, we let everybody know, hey, this is, and we've done that already this year. We told people even before people started suggesting that there was some sort of effort to move or remove signs, that already had that conversation with staff. So we'll make that a normal part of it, going over the specifics of this stuff.
Hey, James, we have an annual, no, Kim sends out an annual email to review the policy on like fraud, waste and abuse and that.
So
We could just include that with
Yeah.
something
makes
like
sense.
this, just, yeah. Everybody.
One other note that I would make, and it rely on Mr. Young down there to tell me if it's a tenable or not, but I would even entertain a provision that an elected official that directs or coerces somebody in opposition to this, hey, why don't you, I know it's technically against the rules, but why don't you go do this, that, or the other, some penalty for that.
So the reason federal and state law does not take that approach and takes this approach instead is because of the First Amendment issue.
So you're telling me that someone elected official could direct an employee and employee would.
By and large, a single individual elected official can direct it. One exclusion. Elected officials cannot direct employees to do it.
It seems like one of those areas that, is there any current law, statute, policy that would affect that? I mean, because knowing our weight up here, we go up to a city employee and we say, hey, I want you to do this. Look who I am, and I'm all
Right,
of it.
so the recourse there would be under the impeachment process. So if you are directing
Okay.
someone to do something that's a violation of an ordinance, that may be basis.
Well, this is a slightly separate issue, but I think you opened up an important door here. I don't think our ordinances don't have interference.
No, we do not.
I mean, most cities do. Most cities, it is an absolute violation of the ordinance for an individual member of the board to direct the city.
Mhm.
We don't have that. I don't know why, but every other city does. But I mean, maybe that's something we should include as part of this. And I think that bring up a very valid point. That would hold everybody accountable.
We do have, yeah, there's a lot of cities that have interference with administration.
I wouldn't be opposed to that. Separation of powers is important.
Okay, so the consensus is to move forward with an ordinance? On
Yeah,
this?
I'm in favor
Okay.
of this. I've read it.
Just so I'm clear, so the enforcement issue, I think you guys bring up a valid point. Are we good with just saying that this is to be enforced by the administration? That enforcement of this ordinance is to be determined by city's disciplinary process, or,
That actually be in the ordinance, or would you just? Well, that would be.
well, I mean,
I would just invoke the provisions and the disciplinary provisions, of the employee policies, procedures manual.
yeah.
I like the idea of having some discretion to review things since. The intent.
Yeah, absolutely.
And just to be clear, the intent is evident in the language. So that is a requirement because it has to be for the purpose of interfering. But there has to be some intent.
All right, moving on, review of monthly city administrator draft report. Comments, questions?
Give me just 1 second, so I want to go through it with everybody, because I know this is something that talked about. So I hope everybody got my email that gave, and this is, of course, in response to some of the conversation we had 2 meetings ago. It wasn't last meeting, it was 2 meetings ago, that we said we would put together a kind of a monthly draft report. Now, timing of which, especially during all the conversations with the staff, talking to Kim, courts, prosecutor about when their monthly closeouts are for financials, for the court cases, et cetera. 90% of the time, we're not going to make the first meeting, just by the time we get things together on the Friday before a board meeting and then out to you. So second meeting in any month is probably the date that we need to hit for, so that we actually have good fresh numbers. Otherwise, we're always gonna be lagging 6 weeks back. So this is kind of a draft using more or less the bullet list that was given last time. Talking a little bit about, not trying to get too deep in the weeds, but it got big fast. And I got to a point where some things I left as placeholders because I didn't have information yet. We'll have it by the next meeting for you. Other things, because trying to not turn this into a 7-8 page document. So, but starting at the beginning, my feeling was that we would start off with just kind of an overview of basic things that are going on in the administration. I know there was a conversation, or at least a bullet point about HR issues. So I talked first about just what's going on in City Hall, which, as you all know, we have the tenant wing here in City Hall. We have 2 current vacancies, one that just became vacant, one that's been vacant now for a few months. This is for a future, I ended up putting in this report, but it's actually an idea I had for a future board work session. I'd really like us to have a conversation about maybe turning this tenant wing, at least as we get some vacancies, into an incubator of sorts, or at least creating some sort of process, because we don't depend on the money, but creating a process by which we can encourage people to move their offices here into City Hall, more or less as an incubator. And the benefit to both the city and City Hall eventually would be that we could have some sort of a sliding scale, either like rebate process or incentive that you would get back potentially, maybe like a portion of your rent. Say you came here for 2 years, and then you went down to Town Square and signed a 5-year lease. And say every year of that lease, we give you back 3 months of rent that you paid to us. We can find out some reasonable level to encourage them not just to move out, because that's one thing that we don't really do here. Because I was told that originally the idea was people would come here and eventually move out. A lot of people have stayed here a long time, which is fine because we're getting rent for it. But if we could encourage people to move out into Garden Prairie and then take a stake and then incentivize that stake to last more than just a month, 3 months, 6 months, 6 years, I think that'd be a really great program. I think it'd be innovative. It would encourage us to help, especially like Garden Prairie Plaza, where we do have open office spaces, or open office spaces as they start being built here in and around our community. So,
Is there any way to leverage the EDC over in Cottleville and some of the resources they have? Maybe form some kind of a local, and it's in Cottleville, but it's St. Charles.
No, and I'm on the board for the EDC. So we, right now, I think they're full, but what I can do, I can talk to Thomas, who's Senior VP of real estate over there. And I can talk to the person who runs the incubator. We could have a conversation about, overflow, or if they've got people that, as they get people that are, because we're not really looking for people to move from their incubator to ours per se,
Yeah.
unless it's a transition into a permanent Garden Prairie. business.
What I was talking about more is the resources that they have, like I believe they offer certain small business classes, different resources for small businesses, less of sharing incubator space, but more of adding additional economic activity in St. Charles County by helping those small business startups that are coming here
Sure.
to still use, because we wouldn't have that same level of resource.
Yep.
For our incubator, but I'm sure that, you know, I mean, I went over there, did a full tour a couple of years ago. And it was pretty impressive, and they offer similarly styled, you know, low rent office spaces for startups, but
What we can do is we can try to maybe form a partnership where this frames it more like an annex where.
Yeah.
You know, again, they're getting a similar sort of benefits and support that they would get at the EDC,
Yeah.
but here at our location. And actually, I know, actually grew up with the gal who runs the incubator, so. So yeah, I'll give her a call and we'll get something worked out. That would be a great idea to make it. If we could make it formalized so it's more like part of the program, that'd be great. Well, that's, by the way, I intended to have that as a full work session in the future, so we'll have that as. Sounds like there's some interest. Now I got some more direction. We'll take that.
I like the idea of the tenants that are here to kind of move through though, and that's the same, in the same style, like you said, for the EDC, is those guys over there, they don't stay there forever. Some of them stay there for a while, but the majority of them become successful. They take the resources, become successful small businesses, and then go into the community, and then they you know, engage in economic activity and develop the community. And then, you know, resets the stage for new folks. So I also agree with your kind of thoughts on having folks stay in the building for, you know, just 10 years and setting up permanent shop here. I don't think that's a good, but City Hall, you know, would be good for long term for us. I think it's much better served in like economic development capacity. So it's my addition. Totally agree.
Excellent. So I did give a little, just kind of a quick overview of where we're at staffing wise. Felt like this kind of gives us everybody where we're at. Finance, I sent you a bunch of information. So that's kind of the canned outputs that we get from our financial software. You could get a lot, you get a little. I'd really just like your input as far as what exactly we're looking for. I don't want to take up, could be in a whole page, but some of those things are really hard to, I don't want to say it's hard to make use of it. Some things we got to recognize when it comes to things like revenue, right? When we look at revenue, if we're going to look at revenue, year over year revenues, we get a lot of our revenues in certain points of the year. So looking at it on a monthly basis, looking like we're down or up really doesn't make sense, because at the end of the day, we're going to get a huge chunk of our money when everybody pays their property tax. We're going to get Christmas money, you know, from Christmas spending, et cetera. So give us, if you guys could give me some input, you know, we don't have to do it all today, offline, of like what we're looking at finance wise. I'd love to.
We used to do it.
Kim still does her one report, which is a page, which we can just slide in.
What we used to do from the software company side is most everything, you know, we just take whatever the annual was, divide by 12, do a spread, right? And then just track where you were the month. And then we had several, particularly revenue streams, a couple of expense, but revenue streams that were extremely seasonal. Like we would get like 75% in over a 2-month period that we would get for the year. And those we would actually budget as we expected to get. Yeah, property tax. If you expect to get
To calibrate.
90% of one, then spread, you know.
Our current software doesn't do that, but I mean, it's certainly something we can do as part of, we can do that as either part of the report or do that as at least part of the narrative so that people recognize that the variances that go up and down month to month are expected.
Yeah, and that's what we would do. Like we would, before we started doing it that way, we would look and go, oh my gosh, you know, we're halfway through the year and we're only 30% of budget right now. And that's usually the finance person determining, yeah, well, we get 60% of that.
I know, I don't mean to not speak toward you guys, but I'm trying to speak towards this very small microphone.
Yeah.
So My apologies to everybody I have my back to.
And then,
I can hear.
okay, to the extent that you look out at new software, the ability to spread that. Or figure that out, a good thing. I won't be here then.
I did mention, I know there was a conversation, or at least a mention of the business licenses. I can give a year over year, I can add a year over year to that, so that there's a little bit more context. But we threw that information in there. As far as I could fill up a lot with what's going on development wise, but we tried to, what I put together here was just quick glimpse of all the developments going on and where they're at. So we know what developments we're talking about, the name of the development, what kind of development is it, such as a single family residential, the developer themselves, so Rowell's company for the first one, and then where they're at. They're in the process of constructing stormwater and public improvements. So they're in the process of still, by now, they might be a little bit past that, but they were doing the stormwater facilities and public improvements, and then, of course, tried to give everybody an update throughout all of those the active developments. Then Parks and Recreation. I didn't have the total numbers yet, so I kind of X'd them out so I knew where to go back and fill them in. But registration's closed for baseball. I did kind of I'd give a quick update on when the practices begin, when the leagues begin. The annual Easter egg hunt, which we did just have this past Saturday. Just briefly what we had going on there with sponsorships. We had 250 participants. That's not right.
I was actually gonna ask Dave.
Well, this was done before that, obviously.
Because they had another zero,
I
basically.
think, I don't know if I got that number off of a previous year. All I know is-
53-year-olds going after Green.
Right.
Well, I will say this, and I'm gonna,
254-year-old.
I'm working, yeah, I'm working with a young man to try to get this one. It's up to the board. We've got 10 minutes to get this done, so we're not doing it during the meeting.
Well, we got staff communications. But
So, anyway, I've got some aerial photos and aerial videos year over year. We're like 3 or 4 times the number of people we had 2 years ago. So it was big. So then I threw in there about our monthly bingo, which will be Friday. And then, of course, our park partner program, which there is a financial aspect to that. That's something to be kicked off again this year. I kind of give a little update. I will give you an update on the final numbers for our second meeting. Then we just kind of threw in what the upcoming concert or upcoming events we have, concerts, our leagues, etc. And then under Public Works, kind of broke it down based on what our guys are doing both in the parks and then by the streets. And then with the STP, which is the surface transportation projects we have, or road projects we have, those are our grant funded projects. I didn't give a full list of all of those, trying to figure out how much information to give you guys or how much you want. Because again, I'm trying to keep this from becoming a huge report, but certainly the plan is to give an update of where we are in the process for each of those. And then because we do our MS4 permit and stormwater stuff regular basis, any kind of inspections, deficiencies, anything of note, I intend to throw in there, especially if there's anything that's going to be reportable to TNR, any illicit discharges, et cetera, we'll make sure we have on there. And then topped it off with public safety. Of course, those numbers are not right. I just got those numbers today, actually. We had, I think it's 211 citations written last month, like 239 warnings. So put that in context. My first year here, that's more context, I think, than we have in like the entire first year. Because we were writing like 20 tickets a month at one point. So
What year did you come in?
2021. When I got here, we were doing like a ticket a day. So That was a little after COVID. Well, they hadn't really recovered from COVID is the problem. I mean,
Yeah.
the police really had not gotten back on their horse and been more proactive on safety measures. They certainly are now. Well, we don't have horses, but maybe we could.
My general feeling when I read through this, that the level of detail for something like this was probably about right. And so to the mayor's point, it's like, well, I assume we wouldn't go through something like this every single meeting you would hit.
No. That's
Communication.
I just want to make sure that the form, I want to go through the form. If this feels like the right level of detail, don't want to
I
make
think
it.
it's, in some instances, maybe it will even be a little bit more detailed,
Sure.
but
Yeah, I spent
To be-
more time.
the more
than I wanted
bullet
to on this. If you tell me to do less, I'll be happy.
no, like, and just for it's just to say an example, like the monthly senior bingo. It's like we continue our monthly senior bingo first of every month. Open to for residents and non-residents, like, probably don't need that much details. It's like, hey, we have monthly bingo again, still ongoing. Whatever, 80 out of 90 seats. We're here. Cool.
And there's some things that there's some things that I would probably, once you've determined that's what you'd like, if there's numbers that are just being updated. Yeah, I'm not gonna have to change, I'm just going through and changing the X's, right? I just ask Nicole, hey, can you come in and fill in the X's?
Yeah.
That's probably what you're more concerned about. And if you want me to take it down to just bingo, how many people we had this month, I can do that too. That's.
I mean, I think like if it was a new program, doing something like a monthly senior bingo was a new program, then I
Sure.
think then giving a longer description, like, hey, this is a new thing you're doing, da, da, da. The other one is like, yeah, programming still ongoing, this is how many people we've had, or how many people we've had your day.
When I see this, what I would think is, spring baseball, what are the dates? What should we know
Yeah.
about when these events are happening? The number of enrollees at the beginning of the season would probably be a good one. I would leave it to city staff to say, here's the points that you really should know about, be informed. And most of these, like senior bingo, if 1 month you came in and there were 5,000 people that showed up, it'd be good information to have. If it's just normal.
Yeah.
Senior bingo every
We
month.
sell out pretty much every time.
As far as level of detail, I like it, and I think that this is great and, what the mayor was kind of indicating, and I know that we're going over for the first time tonight, so we'll probably spend a little more time on it. But I think my thought, and I do part of the rest of the members of the board, as far as what they're thinking. This goes out, we look at it, and then if we have any questions, we bring it up in the meeting and the working session. But I think it's more for our consumption, more just sort of situational awareness on some of the activities going on in the city, more than kind of going through spending a bunch of time each meeting. So just to kind of, drop back on what the mayor was saying, I think it's more for consumption, for us to bring up questions.
Absolutely, yeah.
Yeah, this just brings transparency and probably makes it a little bit easier to.
And this will be in the packet in the future, so everybody in the audience, I look at it this way too. It's also for your consumption, but also for the public's, and so
100%.
for them, yeah, this is educating and being more transparent, communicating. As much as it is, I don't want to go over this every meeting either.
Yeah. I think it's great. It's really
Thank
great.
you, because that was my question is, could we put it in the packet for the public too? And that'd be great.
Just like I want Tom to do in a few minutes, I'm gonna say it's in the report,
There you
and
go.
that's it.
One item-
So are we finished with that?
One item that I did want to, and I know it was discussed the last time, tickets and things like that, not traffic tickets, but maintenance tickets, things like that, the numbers. One thing I'd like to see, only because in the past we've seen our public works tickets pile up. I know when the mayor came into office, we had quite a binder full of back tickets for many years. I'd love to keep the pulse on where we are there and if we are meeting constituent needs or resident needs consistently, or if we're, falling behind.
That's something that Terry and I really got to go through and talk about, because we log everything kind of the same. And so whether it's we log the way we log concerns, whether it's a pothole or something else, probably going to need to find a way to then pull those numbers apart so that people, you're going to really want to see. There are things that just don't get answered. I don't want to say don't get answered, don't get attended to because there is no fix. So there's a long-term fix versus things that Like the guy on Facebook the other day that's like, hey, you guys should put a traffic doesn't, cross traffic doesn't stop sign up. And we had it up in 36 hours. Ordered it, picked it up, put it up. I mean, that's how fast and nimble we can be on a lot of things. But there are other things that people come to with like a stormwater issue. It's like, there really is no fix to that, or at least there's no fix for the city. So, yeah, we can go through and try to pull apart street obstructions, potholes, try to pull some of that information apart versus maybe things that are, I don't know that we really, sometimes we close them out, but it's not necessarily like actually solved. I hate to say that.
So don't let it be too prescriptive, because
Sure.
I don't care if it's tickets, or just in general spirit, leave it up to you guys to think whether the best, the most appropriate way to.
Sure.
Something else that we need to really emphasize is closing them out when they're finished, because I went through them just last week. Kim brought some to my attention, went through a whole list, and it was, the majority of them were already finished, completed. But they weren't closed out enough. It's just,
Let's start getting
That's-
closed down. Then.
Well, that's one of the reasons.
Is there some accountability?
Well, it's just one of the reasons why that's one of the reasons why we're trying to move toward a more mobile system. So that's a conversation. We've test driven a number of systems, and we've got to get to where we're going to pull the trigger on one, because our guys in the field are out there doing the stuff like this, and then they got to text or call or Teams message Terry, and Terry's got to stop what she's doing and go, because they can't just do it from their phone. Most places you should be out there saying, click a picture, log in, done, moving on to the next one. So it just becomes a process, an issue of the process.
That's good.
We do try to audit them really regularly. But if you have nothing else, I have nothing else, and I have no comments for the.
okay, review of the,
Thanks, James.
You're welcome. Thank you.
review of the 4-3 board minute agenda. Any concerns, comments, any for the regular meeting agenda? Hearing none, we'll move on to staff communications, city attorney,
I have nothing, man.
city engineer.
If you don't mind, Mayor, I'd like to say a few things at the regular meeting.
Okay, that's fine. City administrator,
I have nothing there.
alderman.
I do have one thing, and we don't have to dive into it here, but for those that attended the Easter egg hunt, and kind of going back to the number of people that were there, and I think that I went there the year, last year as well, and this year, and I know Alderman Costello was there. I think the last couple of years, and I know that you guys. So the number has, in my estimation, has increased to a level that's near chaos. And I don't know if near, I think it's just chaos. That's the. And it was extremely hard to regulate that number of folks. It's a free event, and I'm quite certain that we've drawn folks from all over the metropolitan area to this event. So I just think that for our own residents, we do this for our residents, and so just going to put this thought out there. And I know some of the other cities, my wife has looked into it. Some have other means of sort of catering, at least make sure your residents have sort of priority in these things, and potentially limiting some of the numbers as well. So I'd like to just, maybe offline or, at another regular meeting, this one or next time we put it on the agenda, but just to kind of discuss, what that might look like, and kind of get everybody else's, feelings on their experience that were out there. Cause I know the majority of us were, but it's just the experience to me, I feel like we're kind of, we're sliding in a direction that is just not really positive, and it's not providing the positive experience that I think that the intended event is designed to be. By no fault of anybody in the city, it's just simply the numbers game, and we're becoming popular, and we got to figure out a way to deal with it. Yeah, so it's a good problem to have, but I think we need to address it.
I went to Cottleville's the week before. They had a quarter of the people that we had. So yeah, we're having conversations about that now, but certainly like to. Pardon me? Easter weekend.
Easter weekend?
Everybody wants that golden ticket.
That's right.
I think this year too, we did posted it on Facebook and did an ad, shot out an ad on 3 different occasions. So
We pushed it out.
like
there.
eliminate that.
We have been improving, and this has all been part of our staff, Parks and Outreach staff, our Recreation Outreach Coordinator has done a tremendous job in improving communication at all levels.
Yeah,
And yeah, I mean,
that's
that's
really good.
certainly been part of it. So we'll have to figure out how we want to adjust and regulate for that.
Yeah, I would
just-
say you could probably go one of two ways. Make it an amenity for residents and really focus on residents. Or if we feel that we can capture the benefit for the city of bringing everyone in, then that's also an option, but it's not going to work. City Hall and the grounds here, if we really try to do that.
I think you ought to just bring in a helicopter and just drop them out of the helicopter.
Now you're talking.
No, I really want to thank all the residents that volunteered and helped and came out and that, I mean, that you saw the chaos and it's like Lee said, it's grown to chaos. To where I was on the phone yelling at James to blow their horn because the little 2-year-olds were all screaming and crying bad. And they were just going nuts, but no, thank you for the ones that came out and helped. I really appreciate it.
The timing is a big problem issue is because we have specific times that we advertise when each age groups are supposed to go off. So we set up and we get ready as one is going off. And if it's already set up and ready 10 minutes prior to the horn, it's nearly impossible to hold them back. They just, the horn, not whatever, they see it.
Kids are fine, it's the parents.
Yeah, the kids, parents are pushing them out there to go get them. So some of them are, not all. But anyway, it's a logistics challenge. So, okay, Fairhaven Boulevard. Any feedback on crosswalks?
Yeah,
Okay.
just a general question.
The new signs, the new,
So feedback from me or feedback from residents?
oh,
in
if
Fairhaven?
if you've heard any from residents.
The answer I got, because the ones that were looking
Positive
for
next?
stop signs, they
Yeah.
said the answer was, it's a good start. So what my explanation was, is that we were potentially going to be qualified for grant funding on Barrett Haven Boulevard. And as we pursued that further, we would, so this was sort of a initial measure to improve safety at the crosswalks. I would like to note that the flashing yellow sign for the crosswalk, that light does not work anymore if we're going to be on that subject. I drove by it, that it does not work.
Okay,
The speed trailers, I was glad to see Officer Birdsong send me a message, and last week we got speed trailers up. So we'll be getting some data back from that. But I think it's also a reminder to the folks that go through there every day that it's a 30-mile-an-hour speed limit. And that should be helpful as well. So there's a lot of good measures that are being implemented right now that I'm personally very happy to see, because I know I've talked about it extensively the last 6 months, but the feedback specifically that I got was that middle of the road crosswalk stop if potentially there was a good start. And I tend to agree. And I think that, like I said, I think that we've all discussed sort of the longer term measures that we'd like to get to, but we want to make sure we capture the appropriate funding before we start to spend it. So my thoughts on it.
The biggest feedback I got was people calling me and asking, do I stop there?
Yeah.
Or not? And they were confused whether it was a stop sign or a stop for the crosswalk.
Yeah.
So I said, well, it doesn't hurt to slow down anytime.
it specifically says stop
Or
or pedestrian.
pedestrians. But that was
Yeah.
the biggest call. I mean, I took probably 10 calls on that.
Yeah.
Whether it stops on me.
All right,
The writing is, it is a little, it's small. If you're doing 30 miles an hour, you see it and you're not familiar with it, it is kind of small writing. So we'll say the sign and the writing, my vision's pretty good, and I kind of had to slow down and look real close to see what he said, but you do see that little stop sign to Alderman Johnson's point. And I heard the same thing as well from a couple of folks. But either way, it is, I think it is a good start.
All right, motion to adjourn the work session?
So move, second.
Got a first by Justin, second by Mark, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Here none, the, work session is adjourned.
I'm gonna call, Alderman Wanling up and try to see if we can get him on the new meeting.
He tried to join the new meeting. It looks like, I think he's on the new meeting, so when I'm gonna check it out.
The direct dial-ins aren't working. I think we, for whatever reason, I called up and tried the direct dial and it said doesn't recognize it. I think I had that problem before when I tried dialing from home. For whatever reason, I can only go and be at the Teams meeting.
All right, let me see.
Add it.